Good morning and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. Remember, you can join me every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. right here on this station where I bring you, the landowner, the information that you need regarding natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. And in case you forgot, and I'm going to make sure that if you listen, you don't forget that I do not, have not, and will not represent oil, gas, pipeline companies. I represent the Pennsylvania landowner, the Pennsylvania oil and gas right holder anywhere in Pennsylvania for such items including, but certainly, lawyer talk, certainly not limited to gas lease negotiations, gas lease extensions, modifications, amendments, top leases, pipeline agreements. I say this often, gives perspective. I have worked on, negotiated, consulted with landowners on pipeline agreements with over 60 different companies across Pennsylvania. Pretty remarkable what's out there. Not saying that I'm so remarkable. What I'm saying is there is a lot of activity. There's a lot of different companies out there that have been active, and there's a lot of experience that we can draw from. And I've personally seen it on behalf of clients ranging from the most tip into the northeastern part of the state in Wayne County all the way down to Greene County, Washington County, and the southwestern corners of the state as well, and in most places in between. Also, represent clients for royalty issues, royalty dispute issues, damages as a result of company operations, surface use agreements, roadways, well pad agreements, compressor sites, buying and selling property within the natural gas areas of development in Pennsylvania. And certainly, I represent clients who are interested in landowners, gas right holders who are interested in selling their oil and gas rights or assigning them or transferring them in any fashion. And I'll say this, if you're not represented and you are considering selling your oil and gas rights, get representation. Whether you call me, please call someone. And if you're considering doing this, you need to ask, why am I going to do this? You need to make sure that you're looking at this in every possible angle. Do not allow short-term, medium-term, sometimes even long-term frustration drive a decision which you may regret later on, or that your children may regret that you did later on. But we want to make sure that you're looking at this from all angles. So I'm not going to do a show today about buying and selling oil and gas rights, though I am going to touch on it some more. I'm going to talk about options and how they apply to all different types of agreements. But I want to say, if you are considering selling your oil and gas rights, I'll just say you can call me 570-307-0702. But if you don't call me, call someone. Call someone that knows what they're doing. People are signing, again, bad agreements to sell oil and gas rights with tons of powerful company loopholes, and they're entering it and they're not getting the compensation, and they're entering into bad agreements. We have to stop it. If you're going to sell your oil and gas rights and you decide that's in your best interest and you know everything, then you've made a good decision. You've considered it. You've made a good decision. But too many people aren't considering all these factors, and they're not eliminating these loopholes, and they're coming back to bite them. I see it. I get the calls after people entered into agreements saying, now I have a problem. And I hate to say this, but sometimes you're left with, and I try not to say it to the client landowner, but saying something like, boy, I wish you would have called me before you signed this agreement. We could have then addressed, discussed, or attempted to address, and if we couldn't address the issues and problems, then you could elect, well, I don't want to do this agreement. Or you could say, well, I'm going to do the agreement, but I know about the pitfalls and the potential problems. But given the money, given the opportunity, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. My big repeated concern for all agreements is that landowners are entering into these agreements without fully considering all of the relevant factors that they need to be considering without fully understanding the terms of the agreement and being educated on the market in their area, whether they could get more money, better language, and ways to strengthen the agreement. Too many people call the office after they've entered into a bad agreement to see what can be done. And in most cases, there's not anything that can be done. Sometimes there's a little, but I'll tell you this, Tioga County, real quick, you guys have a chance where people may have entered into bad agreements, and this happens elsewhere also. I talk about these opportunities where the low gas price market has created opportunities to get out from under some of these really bad agreements that were entered into when landowners were uninformed, were not educated on these issues, and even when attorneys at the time, when landowners were represented, didn't understand the issues. Too many times I have landowners say to me, yeah, I took it to my attorney, and they said, oh, yeah, this looks good. I signed it, and I said, and they bring it to me later, and I say, well, geez, this is too bad because there were different things that could have been done, but we can't go back in time. But in some cases now, think about this, guys. Think about lease extensions, lease modifications, lease amendments. Same thing with pipelines, extensions, modifications, amendments, top leases. These can be opportunities to get a second bite of the apple. But when you're taking that first bite, we want to take the best bite that we can. We want to bite into that big round part of the apple. I just thought in my head as a little kid, we were out in the woods, and sometimes we go out all day, and you go out there and you look, and what do we eat? We'd find apples in the fall, and what do? Usually, at least in the area where I grew up, you might only get one good bite of the apple because part of it was brown, indented, all these questionable features that the apple has. And you find one nice good side to the apple, usually about a quarter of the apple, if that, and you take your big bite, you throw it, and you get your next one and look for that bite. We want to take the best bite of these apples. When you get these contracts, we want to make sure when we're taking our bite of this contract, we're doing it one time, we're going to get the best possible agreement. But occasionally, and very rarely, you may get an opportunity to get that second bite, to enter into a new lease, to modify your lease, to amend your lease, and you better darn well take care of that. You better take advantage of that. Take advantage of opportunities. Take advantage of it. So, if you get a second bite of the apple, do not repeat the mistakes that you or your neighbors or your friends or other landowners in Pennsylvania have made. Take the best possible bite. Think again, if you have a lease extension, modification, pipeline extension, modification, amendments, you need to look at this as a potential opportunity. Get assistance, understand it, because you may have a great opportunity. And how did this occur? Because of the low gas price market, companies are not drilling. They can't meet the terms of the lease or pipeline agreement that they signed with you, and now they want to extend it, modify it, or amend it. Generally speaking, as you could maybe imagine, they want to do it to their benefit. But you as a listener are smart. You're smart. You understand, hey, this may be an opportunity. Let me investigate, let me find out, and let me become educated on these issues and make the best of this opportunity. That is key. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. You can join me right here on this station every Sunday, 8 to 9 a.m. Okay, I'm going to jump into our topic here. Primary topic of the day is option agreements. And as always, stick with me because we're not talking about any specific agreement. This is going to cover issues relating to all landowners in Pennsylvania, whether Southwest, North Central, Northeast, or anywhere in between. This is going to be an informative show for you. Whether you're talking gas leases, pipelines, compressor sites, selling gas rights, typically option agreements come into play. In the vast majority, and when I say vast, I'm talking 90+%, and probably even the high 90s, except for leases. So, okay, what is an option agreement? We're gonna go back a little, because sometimes I think I get a little ahead over my skis, if you will. So I want to make sure that I'm explaining what we're talking about, and then we're going to address some very interesting aspects to option agreements, and as a general rule, what you as landowners should be looking for and looking out for. Option agreements. Here's what that is. You think typically when you enter into a contract with a company or another person, as a general rule, most people kind of think, okay, well, they're going to give me $500 and I'm going to sell them hay bales out of one of my hay fields on my farm. So you enter into that contract with the person who's going to purchase the hay from the field on your farm. So you say, okay, I'm going to cut that hay, I'm going to bale it up, they're going to buy it, and let's say they're buying it from the field and they're going to haul it away. So you think that's a straight contract. Well, let's throw this situation in. Say that same contract, the farmer says, okay, I'm going to sell you hay out from my field and you're going to give me $500. Say the person, here would be an option agreement. The buyer of the hay would say, okay, we're going to enter into this agreement. I'll give you $10 now, and come summer, whenever you cut the hay, I'll have the option of whether to buy that hay or not. That would be an option agreement. Now, again, it doesn't translate so much into oil and gas situation, but it gives an illustration of a sample, and I mean a crude sample of an option agreement. But we deal with option agreements in oil and gas matters, which become much more complicated and complex and highly problematic for you, the landowner. I'm sure any listener who's a farmer who sells their hay from the field, like my father, you're thinking, hey, I don't like this option agreement, because what if the buyer decides they don't want to take the hay? They don't like the way it looks, whatever the case may be. They don't like the quality, and they say, yeah, or maybe they've already bought enough hay, or they've been able to buy other hay cheaper down the road. So they say to you, farmer, well, keep my $10 that I paid you. I'm not interested in buying your hay. I'm going to move on. I am going to decline my option. If they bought the hay, they would then be exercising the option. We're going to talk about how this applies to oil and gas matters here in the next section, and several more. But this is our little primer on a basic option agreement. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. You can join me every Sunday, 8 to 9 a.m. on this station. You can call the office, 570-307-0702, and visit the websites at pagasleaseattorney.com and pipelineattorney.com. And, of course, stay very closely tuned to this very important commercial break. I'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. Hope you enjoyed that very informative commercial break. But seriously, if you are looking for representation, you want to learn more what we do, first off, I encourage everybody, whether you're looking for representation or information, go to pagasleaseattorney.com, go to pipelineattorney.com. Free, outstanding resource. And I guess here, I say it's outstanding. I wrote virtually everything on the website. Take advantage of it. Check out the blogs. Check out the information. Sign up for the newsletter. Everything is free, and hopefully you will find it informative. As always, the radio show, we post up the weekend show on Monday morning, and we also index the radio shows. So if you're interested in learning about pipeline agreements, surface use agreements, compression, royalties, whatever it may be, there's going to be a show on pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com, that will meet your needs, that you'll be looking for that information. So check it out. It's free. You can listen anytime. And if you can't join us on a Saturday or you can't join us on a Sunday, depending upon where you are and where we air the show, you can go check out pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. Check out the prior shows. Check out the new show each weekend we'll have up there on Monday morning. Just don't miss out on the opportunity. And again, if you're looking for representation, you can always call the office, 570-307-0702. But whether you're looking for representation or not, you're looking for information, check out pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. Okay, let's get back to option agreements. Again, generally speaking, what an option agreement is that two parties enter into an agreement where there's typically, some form of compensation, money exchanged, where one party gives the other party some compensation up front in exchange for the option at a later date to pursue or finalize this agreement. So I gave my farmer's agreement earlier for selling hay in the field. Let's talk about some oil and gas right option agreements. Here's when you see option agreements related to oil and gas and development. Virtually almost everywhere. Here's where you see, and in a lot of ways, even leases are option agreements, because when you sign the agreement, the company has between, usually the shortest time is 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, in order to determine whether they want to move forward, pay you, and accept your lease. So really, it's kind of an option period in that time frame between the time that you sign the lease and the time that you get paid. And I can tell you firsthand where family members in my family, very, very close, signed a lease with the company, and when the payment was due, that week, the lease was sent back. The actual lease that was signed was sent back, and the company said, hey, thank you, but no thank you. We're not interested in finalizing this lease or in taking this lease. So although in this case it was about literally $250,000, we are going to go ahead and decline, and here's your lease back. Certainly not an exciting day, but something as an informed landowner knew could occur. Where else do we see some more typical option agreements? Pipelines, primary example. Surface use agreements, where a company is going to use the surface of your property to construct something. Storage agreements, roadway agreements, compressor site agreements. When companies want to, and I've been doing more of this lately, especially in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania, but this occurs all over, when a company wants to buy an area of your property or your property because they want to develop it for their needs, whether it be a meter site, a compression site, a natural gas facility of some kind, a water withdrawal facility agreement, all of these. And very important one, if you are interested in selling your oil and gas rights, you're going to get an option agreement where the company has the option, whether in the future, to finalize the agreement and give you that big back-end payment. Bottom line, option agreements are extremely, extremely common in the oil and gas field when dealing with landowners. And listen, it's not bad. Option agreements are very reasonable things. The issue becomes entering into a good, fair option agreement, not an option agreement that is completely or massively directed in one direction. And as you may guess, that direction is not in your favor. It's towards the company's favor, because I would be willing to bet that there's no landowners out there that drafted and wrote the option agreement that they sign. No, that option agreement is written by who? The company. And who at the company? Well, probably they're very experienced, high-priced attorneys, because they know that's what they need to do to protect themselves. So you as a landowner, do you want to just simply sign the option agreement presented to you by the landman? Here we go. Let's do it now. Who works for the company, not you, the landowner. And that agreement was drafted by the company and most likely by the company's attorney, and has evolved over time within the company to be designed to give the company the best agreement they can obtain. Does this seem like an agreement that you should just go ahead and sign? Well, it's your decision, but I think that I would strongly recommend that you get some assistance if you think you want to sign this. You need to understand it, and we're going to talk about this. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'm here with you every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m., and if you're looking for representation, you can always call the office 570-307-0702. So, okay, we have identified that option agreements are used all the time in oil and gas contracts with you, the landowner. Also, option agreements are understandable and can be very reasonable when they are fair and negotiated to the landowner's benefit. Think about when the company landman hands you a contract. Is that contract going to be drafted to your best interest? Think about it. Think about all the people and all of the different lawsuits against the companies that are out there now. Think about all the people that you probably know or you yourself have had a bad experience because your contract wasn't negotiated, you didn't understand what was in it, you weren't educated, and you ultimately signed a bad agreement. So again, we can't go back in the past, but what we can do is make sure we don't repeat those mistakes. So option agreements presented all the time. I've had clients, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients enter into option agreements, but all of them are negotiated. I've never, ever remotely seen an option agreement presented to a landowner in an oil and gas related development issue or any other oil and gas related issue where I said, oh, hey, this is perfect. Here, go ahead and sign. And it's not a case as an attorney who's saying, well, geez, they're hiring me. I better come up with some reason why are they hiring me? Why are they paying me money to work for them? I better come up with something. That's not the case. These things are jumping out. If you are a client, you ever came to the office and we sat down, you'd see when I go over these agreements, I pull out all my different colored highlighters. It's like I'm in kindergarten as far as I have all these like crayons, but they're highlighters. And so I have a little system that I do, and I use the pink or red highlighter for major problem issues. Yellow highlighter, that's just kind of make sure I keep in my track. And orange highlighter of, hey, this is a concern, and it's a significant concern, but it's not to the level of a red line or pink line concern. So at the end of that, I get done from doing this review, going through each and every line. I've done it hundreds of times, and say, okay, let's see how pink this document is. And many, many times, in most cases, there is a lot of pink highlights, which represent very significant concerns that in almost all cases need to be changed, or at least the impact needs to be minimized or mitigated to eliminate or at least reduce the potential or the actual negative impact for you, the landowner. So let's get into that a little. But you know what? Before we do, this will be a good time to break. You've been listening to, or you are listening to, All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. You can join me on this station every Sunday, 8 to 9 a.m. Check out PA Gas Lease Attorney. Check out Pipeline Attorney. You can call the office, 570-307-0702. But stay tuned. I'll be right back after, again, a very important message. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'm going to jump right into it here. We're talking about option agreements. Option agreements are extremely common. I have hundreds and hundreds of clients who I've negotiated and represented who have entered into option agreements. They are not a bad thing in and of themselves, but typically, in my opinion, when they are presented to the landowner, they are not in the form that you want to sign. What do I mean by that? Here are major points, and I'm going to break them down. Whenever you're presented with an option agreement, you need to, my opinion, you must negotiate, number one, money. How much money are you being paid up front? How much money will you be paid in the future if the company exercises or uses the option? Too many people think the back end money, that big payment, is automatic. Too many people think that, and too many people find out, much to their disappointment, that back end money is absolutely not automatic. So you have front end money to buy the option payment. You need to negotiate that to make it as high as we can. Then you have the back end money. You need to negotiate that too as well. Not going to go deeper into that yet. So I'm going to go into other areas that you must, or at least try very hard to negotiate when dealing with option agreements. Again, number one, money. Upfront, back end money must negotiate. Number two, time or length of the option must be negotiated. You as a landowner want to shorten the time that the company has to decide whether they're going to exercise the option and give you the subsequent payment. Again, we'll talk about it in more detail here in a few minutes. Number three, the language in the agreement. We can look at money. We can look at how long the agreement lasts. But then we also need to dive into the details of the language. And that gets very complicated, even for attorneys, especially for attorneys who aren't experienced. So you need to be looking at, any time you're presented with an option agreement, the big three items you need to look at. And again, big, broad here. We're looking at the forest from outer space, not from Earth. This is how broad we're talking about. We're talking about a very broad picture. Option agreements. You must negotiate. You must negotiate. Bottom line, must negotiate. Well, what are you trying to negotiate? Number one, money. Upfront, subsequent payment. Number two, time or length of the agreement. And number three, the language, the words themselves in the agreement, the terms, whatever we want to call them, must be negotiated. Must. In my opinion, and one of my strongest opinions that I have, must be negotiated. If you as a landowner are presented with an option agreement by a company and you simply sign what you are presented, in my opinion, you are making, in almost all cases, a very bad mistake. Give my disclaimer, not specific advice for anybody, but as a general principle, I can't think of a single case, and I've done hundreds, where a client was presented with an option agreement that wasn't negotiated, and usually substantially in their favor, whether it be by money, by reducing the time length in the option agreement, or by the language, and in many cases, all three or two of the three must be negotiated. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. We're talking about option agreements. So let me break those down some more. Let's talk about one of the big three. Now we're going to come down from outer space, zoom in, and we're going to start sifting through some of these trees. But this isn't, each one of these, I guess we could say, is its own forest. We talk about looking at the tree, looking at the forest. Are you seeing the trees? Are you seeing the forest? Let's say this. When you're talking about money alone, that's not a single tree that we're focusing on. Money itself is a small forest. What do I mean by that? You have typically two types of payments in every option agreement. Number one is the option payment. That is the money that is given to you, the landowner, for the option agreement. So Let's give an example. Some companies want to give you, my opinion, a measly $600 to sign an option agreement. My clients generally don't sign those types of agreements. I find that from my position, from the position of a landowner, to literally be offensive. Literally. I've had clients sign $25,000 option agreements, $10,000, $5,000, $15,000, not $600. Stay away, guys, if you can, and you should be able to. Not specific advice, general advice. I would be avoiding $600 option agreements. Similarly, there's another company, and we'll talk here. This happens all over, but hey, listen up, Tioga County, $1,000 option agreement. Susquehanna County, $1,000 option agreements. Again, my first thought would be, generally speaking, thank you, but a big no thank you. So I'll give you a thank you, but I'm also going to give you a polite no thank you. I am not going to sign an agreement for an option payment where I'm going to give you a choice for years to decide whether you're going to use or not use my property, and you're going to give me an extremely company-favored agreement, and you're going to pay me $600 or $1,000 to buy substantial rights to determine whether or not you want to move forward. And you hear me talk about the landowner option dilemma. Check out pagasleaseattorney.com. We have an article up there on that. I think there's a couple sections of the website. This is a major issue. Companies shortchange the landowner, in my opinion, up front because they say, well, we'll offer them $600, or we'll offer them $1,000, we'll offer them $1,500, which will make us look good by saying, oh, we're going to give you some money, and deter them from going to an attorney. This isn't about trying to drum up business. This is about companies making smart decisions to say, okay, how do we keep the landowners away from a lawyer who may know what they're doing and properly advise the client, the landowner? Well, how can we do that? Well, let's offer them some money, but not very much. And then they'll say, well, geez, if I'm only getting $600 or I'm only getting $1,000, I better not go to an attorney because I'm going to spend that money. And in fact, it may, in cases, cost me more than what they're paying me, so I better stay away. So I can do this. This all seems pretty simple. I can do it myself. Well, I'm going to tell you, I haven't met very many people in many years who have been able to do that themselves. And in fact, I've seen many attorneys make what I see as mistakes in the process as well. So it's a smart move. How often do I say it? Companies are smart. Jimmy Sanderson, it's not their first rodeo. They've been through this process. Give them a little up front, and then they'll be deterred, or they don't want to go to an attorney, and then we can take advantage and get a real good company-friendly agreement drafted by our lawyers, used hundreds of times, thousands of times, because why? Because it works for the company. Not because it works for the landowner, because it works for the company. So please watch out for low front-end option payments. If I am a landowner and I can say no to the offer, which in most cases you can, I am not going very far at all down a path where a company is offering me $600, which my opinion is a joke, or $1,000, which again, in my opinion, is a joke. It's just a very slightly more expensive joke, but still, in my opinion, a joke. Generally speaking, my clients all sign option agreements that more than cover the attorney fees as a general principle. Not always, because some people say, okay, I will do a lower front-end option, but there's reasons why I'm going to do that. We try very hard to stay away from those scenarios, but sometimes the landowner who is fully informed elects to say, hey, you know what? I see these weaknesses, but because of these other strengths, because of maybe the time factor that we negotiated, because of the language that we've negotiated, I'm willing to take a lower front-end payment for these reasons, but I'm doing it with full knowledge and being fully informed, not entering into a low-level agreement because I was too afraid to go to an attorney because the money wasn't good enough. So please watch out for these low-level option agreements. You can negotiate that number. What's the company going to say? Oh, that's all we pay. That's all we pay. Then fine. A lot of cases, what my clients say is, well, fine, come back when you're willing to pay more. And many times they come back. Sometimes they don't. But sometimes, you don't always have to enter into an agreement. You don't always have to enter into an agreement. Don't sign bad agreements. You can negotiate them. And you don't have to jump right away and enter into an agreement. You can take your time. In almost all cases, despite what the company says, especially when they're coming to you and they're asking for an option of 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Go seek an attorney who knows what they're doing if you want to seriously consider the offer. That is my specific advice. Go see an attorney who knows what they're doing. Other than that, this isn't advice for anyone with specificity or any specific advice. But my point is, because I don't want to get into, you got to look at your situation. But the idea in a typical situation, I do not like at all. And very, very rarely do we have clients who sign any type of an agreement, as pipeline agreement, any type of an agreement, where they're going to get a $600 payment up front or a $1,000 payment up front. I see this as a trap. It is a trap for you, the landowner. The company is very smart. They set a lot of traps. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. So, okay, money, sticking with money. The second part to money, you have your upfront option, but then you have your subsequent payment. So if the company decides after so many years, they decide they're going to use this agreement, then they're going to pay you that bigger payment. So say they offer you $600 or $1,000 up front, and then they negotiate and say they have 5 years to decide whether they're going to use the agreement. And if they do, say they have to pay you $30 per foot of pipeline. Well, you're only getting that big subsequent payment, or the bigger, depending upon what's going on, only if the company exercises or uses the option. Don't be fooled here. You need to understand that's not a guarantee, and then hundreds of landowners have signed option agreements, got the 600, got the 1,000, got whatever that option payment was, and never received another payment. You got to understand this, and you have to negotiate both the upfront and subsequent payment. And usually you're able to move those numbers, and a lot of times we're able to move both the upfront and the back-end payment. In some cases, from numbers like a $20,000 offer to $200,000, from $50,000 to $100,000, all different numbers. So when presented with an option agreement, no matter what the agreement is, you must seek to negotiate to maximize money, both upfront and subsequent payment. When I get back, we're going to talk about time or length of options, and we're going to talk about the need, the absolute necessity to negotiate strongly the language and terms, the words in these agreements. I'll be right back after this break. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. Stay tuned to this important message. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. Before I get into this, remind you, if you missed today's show or any other show of recent times, I've been doing the show since 2010. You can go to the websites, pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. You can check out the radio show. We'll have today's show up on Monday, and we have hours and hours and hours and hours of radio shows that you can search by index on the websites pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. By the way, there is a lot of other outstanding educational information available for you on the websites. Okay, we are talking about option agreements. I said earlier, kind of the big, and I mean very broad perspective. Option agreements, common, okay, but we must negotiate them. We must bring them to the center, not totally on the company side. And ideally, we'd like to bring them more to our side, to the landowner side, which in a lot of cases we can do. But you got to look at every case individually, as I say all the time. So, okay, big three items are money, upfront, back-end money, must negotiate. Number two, when we talked about money in detail in the last segment, now number two, we're going to talk about time or length of the option, and we're going to finish with the language, the words in the agreement and how they need to be negotiated. Okay, time. We're going to talk about time pretty quickly because I want to talk about language. Time, length. What do I mean? Okay, said earlier, you get a payment up front for, it's called the option payment to enter into the agreement. Then from there, you may get a subsequent payment if the company exercises the agreement or takes the option, accepts it. So, well, how long do they have? Well, great. I always love this lawyer answer. It depends. It depends. Some cases, they may have 5 years to decide. I don't like those cases. Some cases, they may have 7 years to decide. Guess what? Don't like those cases. Some cases, they may have 9 years to decide. Really? Don't like those cases. And of course, it could even be longer. In other cases, the company wants 3 years to decide. Some cases, 2 years to decide. Some cases, 1 year. But all of these numbers, all of these lengths, we need to try to and negotiate these term lengths. So if the company wants 5 years, you don't want the company to have 5 years. That's going to be a burden on your property. You may get a better offer. Something better may come along within those 5 years. Maybe you want to sell your property. Maybe you want to get a mortgage on your property. And this option is not going to be something you want to have outstanding on your property. I don't care what anyone tells you or the landman who works for the company, what they tell you, that option agreement is a burden on your property. There is no way around that. It is a burden. It's a burden they want to pay you, $600, $1,000 to sustain for 5 years or whatever time. That's a burden. And I'll tell you, in my opinion, strongly, it is not worth the burdening your property for 3, 5, or longer, or even 2, or I don't care, even 1 for $600 or $1,000. So be careful. So what do we want to do? We also want to negotiate to shorten the option period. My opinion, I don't care who it is. I don't care where it is in a state. You talk about pipelines, roadways, surface use agreements, those types of contracts. 5 years, in my opinion, way too long. I don't remember, not saying it never happened, but I don't remember a client of mine entering into an option agreement that gave the company a 5-year option term. My high that I like to see, the longest option term that I like to see is 2 years. I have entered into, my clients, not myself, but my clients have entered into, I don't know, well over 100 option agreements with a 2-year or less option. 2-year or less. So when a company comes to my client with a 5-year option, our general position is typically going to be, it's the client's call, but it's typically, when they understand everything, is going to be, look, we'll give you a 2-year option. Maybe, in a rare case, will a client agree to a 3-year option, but we're looking at a maximum. We try to do as a maximum a 2-year option term. So we negotiate it. So think, oh, we're in a hurry. We need to sign this. We need to sign this, landowner. But oh, by the way, we get a 5-year window to decide if we want to use it. Okay, not going to go back here, but remember, Why are you going to sign a bad company-friendly, very company-friendly agreement for a 5-year option when the gas prices are low and companies' budgets are reduced / cut? Why sign a 5-year agreement in the worst possible market for you as a landowner when the vast majority of offers are at 2 years or maybe 3 years that I see? Why sign a 5? Honestly, I don't know. But not specific advice. We got to be careful of that, but certainly specific advice to be thinking about those things. So term length of the option must be negotiated in an effort to reduce that time frame. I do not like at all 5-year options for any type of an agreement. Don't like it at all, and should be, in my opinion, in almost all cases, absolutely avoided. 2 years or less, maybe 3 in the right circumstances, but that's my general position. 5-year options, see you later. No need to do it, in my opinion. Well, it begs the question, well, who am I? Well, you're listening to All Things Marcellus, and I am attorney Doug Clark at the Clark Law Firm, and I represent landowners. And I do these contracts, and these are my very, very strong opinions. Okay, got to jump into it. Got a little excited about those time lengths because they drive me crazy. Sorry, stay away at all costs, if at all possible, for 5-year options or longer, even 4. Okay, what else do we got to look at? Of the big 3, we want to negotiate money. We want to negotiate option time length. We want to negotiate language in the agreement. And this is the most complicated. Money's simple. Time length of the agreement, simple. But language of the agreement, that's where you get very complicated issues. What do I mean? Now we're talking about the words in these documents. And some of these option agreements are so powerfully written to the benefit of the company that they must be negotiated and significantly changed, or you as a landowner absolutely should not sign that contract. I have a very strong opinion on that point. And as a practicing lawyer who's doing these oil and gas contracts every day that I work, which is most days, I have not seen yet an option agreement that I've not worked on, that we have, in my opinion, significantly improved the language of the agreement. So if for some reason you couldn't get more money and you couldn't shorten the time frame, but for some reason you still want to enter into that agreement and you're willing to take that compensation, take that length of option, well, now we have to make sure that we're protecting you and getting the strongest language. We need to make sure that you're covered basic stuff for future liability. We need to make sure that we eliminate multi-line rights in a pipeline right-of-way agreement whenever possible. Those can be the differences right there alone, even though you can't get more compensation. If you can get compensation for every pipeline that comes in some cases, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's just an easy way. But let's go beyond that. Let's talk about loopholes in language. We talked about these option agreements could be for pipelines agreements, surface use agreements, storage agreements, selling of property, selling of oil and gas rights, and many other types of agreements. Companies write these agreements to give themselves loopholes, to give themselves the ability to get out of the agreement, not pay, say, hey, extend the agreement or we're no longer interested. So we got to eliminate loopholes. Some of these loopholes are the size of black holes. We go back outer space theme today, or size of black holes in outer space. Some of the loopholes written in these agreements are canyon-sized loopholes, but some of them are much smaller. They're hidden, but they are every bit as powerful, that they allow the company to extend the agreement, to get out of the agreement for any particular reason that they want to say, or no reason at all. You need to understand these loopholes. We need to tie them up. we need to eliminate them or mitigate them. Or if you're going to sign, you need to darn well know there's a huge loophole here. I can go on, but I'm running out of time. I want to give you this quick example. If you are presented with a option agreement and a separate easement agreement, two different documents, be careful, because many of these agreements will say that when you sign the option, if the company exercises the option, then we'll use the easement agreement, the second document, but we can ask for other terms that we reasonably request in the future. Stay the heck away from those agreements. Never had a client sign that, and I don't think I ever will, because I think it borderlines on malpractice to have a client sign an agreement like that with regard to a right-of-way. Not specific advice other than, well, be very careful with those types of agreements, please. Tioga County landowners, you're getting those agreements offered to you. Please be careful. I don't care, though, where you're located. Please be careful. I do not like to see clients or landowners sign option agreements with separate easement agreements, especially in pipelines, roadways, any type of those surface activities. Sometimes it can be acceptable, or it could be acceptable, but to have two different documents, but you cannot allow the company to have the ability to change the terms once they exercise the option. Because do you want to get into a fight as to what is a reasonable and customary term that they are requesting to change? And you say, well, I don't like that. And they say, oh, no, that's reasonable. And now what are you doing? Are you going to go to court? Are you going to fight it? There's requirements that you have to sign in certain periods. Please be careful. Whether you call me or somebody else, get assistance. Do not find yourself in a trap that you're later going to regret. Do not sign anything unless you understand all aspects and where there are pros, where there are cons, benefits, and detriments. Please, guys, be careful. We're at the end. You've been listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. You can join me every Sunday, 8 to 9 a.m. on this station. And remember, stop signing bad agreements. And the landman works for the company, not you, the land owner. Have a great week, everyone.